Well, this is unlike any other video that I've ever made before. In today's video, I'm going to show you every art journal, junk journal, collage glue book that I have ever made in the last 12 years. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I feel like every journal that I made has taught me something. And I want to share those things that I have learned. And going through these journals is the best way to do it. This video is going to be very long, so keep that in mind if you want to watch it in chunks, if you want to have it playing in the background while you're doing something else and I'm keeping you company. However you would like to watch, I'm happy to share this information with you. So I have my journals kind of scattered around my house in different locations and some here in my studio as well. So I gathered everything together. I made a huge pile and I already discovered my first lesson that I want to share with you, and that is put dates on things. So many things I just don't have dates on them and I don't know which one came first. Did I make this one first or did I make this one first? So I am just going to start with what I know are some of the oldest ones that I have and then go from there. Now the first thing that I want to share is this scrapbook. This I did put a date on and it says 2014, so it's about 11 years ago. And this is different from the journals that I would start doing later on, like this, because I had a very specific purpose for this one. I had bought a set of themed paper. There's this artist, her name is Teresa Collins. She designed some paper with a travel theme, and it was also kind of vintage and I really liked it. So I wanted to make a scrapbook where you could see a lot of the papers. So this one, even though it has this binding, this coil bound binding, since the papers are all different sizes, my intention was not to store it on a bookshelf, you know, as you would just kind of slide a book in like that. This one does need to be laying flat, or at least it's the best enjoyed when it's just laying flat somewhere. It's almost like a coffee table book, right? So it's not that practical as far as putting it in, because if I do stand it up, then the pages kind of, you know, from the weight, they go crooked. So it was an interesting experiment to do it this way. It's all, you know, kind of like a stack, but still connected through coil bind. And on the back, I know that I used just a piece of cardboard, plain cardboard, and I just needed one. I mean, I could have made two, you know, a back and a front, but I really wanted the display of the layers of papers to really show. So that is why I chose to do it this way. So on the front, I have this little pocket where I can put some things in. So I have a little piece of currency and a ticket of a place that I went to. So this is all about Vienna. I lived in Vienna in 2001 and 2002, and I also was there a couple years before as a tourist. And this place, this city, really left a big impression on me. I moved there when I was 26 or 27, and it was just so incredibly beautiful, so much history. I lived there before I was married, before I had kids, so it was my time to explore. And even though I worked there, I was a teacher, an English language teacher, in my free time, all I was doing was exploring the city. It was my hobby. I took up Vienna as my hobby, to learn as much as I could. I bought books, I went on tours, I just went everywhere. And so when I was creating this, I really wanted to kind of remember a lot of the things about the place that I went to. So these photo images I got from Flickr, which is a website that used to be really popular in the 1990s and early 2000s. It's like a photo archive site, and these are, you know, photos that other people took that I just really liked and enjoyed. So with one of the lessons that I learned from this journal or from this scrapbook is that you can find outside sources and use them as your own. And I'm not saying, you know, claim that I took this photo. I know that somebody else took this photo. But what I did was I printed it out just like it is a photo and put it here in my my book, my scrapbook. So here's an envelope that just kind of has the flap so that I can access anything inside. That's why it's up a little bit higher, but also so that I can, you know, that it shows in the layers. This is done, this coil binding is done with a machine called Zutter Bind It All, and it works fine. I got the Zutter at a garage sale one year and just used it for lots of projects, and there is an alternate that I see people use called a cinch. That is also a really good thing to consider using if you like this idea of coil binding something. So here's another photo, and sometimes I would label, you know, where these places were so that I knew. This Teresa Collins paper, she also did a sticker set that went along with it. So I went ahead and I bought it because I wanted to just incorporate all the things in here. Okay, and then I also wrote some notes of a few memories or things that I wanted to remember about these places. This is a folder, a file folder, I guess you call it. Lots of stickers, and then I did a little, like a cascade photos. I could have put more stuff on the back. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll go back and I'll put some more photos in there too. Okay, and another file folder with more photos. And then back here I had one little pocket, and then on this I could have something on the front and on the back. And then here is the end, Sachertorte and coffee. So I had extra paper, and so I wanted to use more of it, and that's where this came in. So I kept with the theme of Vienna, and I started to do a kind of a journal, and I kind of experimented with how to put in calendar days. This was all if I wanted to use something like this in the future. So it was just kind of a test, right? I didn't actually use it, but that, or at least that part I didn't. And I did a little bit of collage in here, but the main purpose of this was to use it as a place where I could actually journal. Now, with my journals, a lot of times, most of the time, like 95% of the journals that I make, I don't write in them. I don't use any kind of written form to communicate, to share, or when I create journals, they are visual journals. I enjoy working with paper and, you know, the experience of collage mostly. So journaling is not something that I do, but because I had very specific memories that I wanted to keep regarding my time in Vienna, that's where I did some journaling. This page, I just had a bunch of postage stamps, vintage Austrian postage stamps. And I do remember that I had an old inker that was almost out of ink, and I didn't know what to do with it. And so that's where I got the idea of I would just run it across my pages and then use that black or darker background as the base for having colorful stamps that really are vibrant and stand out. And that is about it for this. So this one and these two go together. Now this one I have never shared with you. I did not put a date on it. I didn't finish it, but this also must have been around 2014. This was my first experiment with junk journaling, and it was my testing ground for seeing how layouts worked, you know, what kinds of things that I could do, how could I layer paper, how could I use color in figuring out, you know, what looks good on a page. So as I said, I didn't finish it, and I almost threw this out many times because there's no purpose for it other than being a really good educational tool for myself. And so that's why I kind of kept it as a reminder of all the things that I could learn with it. So how is this here? This was, oh, I think the whole thing was made with envelopes. And then there's loads of little pockets and things along the way, right? This is Tim Holtz paper that I recognize. And I think, yeah, there's another pocket here. So I was just experimenting with all the ways that you could create interactive things on a page. So it could be used for photos, perhaps, you know, a good foundation or a base for photos. And yeah, I wish I had, must have been something up here at one point. And more little pockets. And so here, I wanted to continue doing a few more things, but then I guess I just ran out of interest in this, but that's okay. As I said, I just used it as a learning tool. How does this one work? I don't even remember. Okay, this goes like this, and these come out of here. I learned this from Kathy Orta, was her name. I learned a lot from her. This top of the spine didn't come out properly, so I made it a little bit too short, but that's okay. This was my good experience with learning how to create interactive junk journal pages. Here is one of my first junk journals. It was in a vintage style. This piece right here is a Tim Holtz, I guess it was like a grunge piece. I forgot. It's kind of made in this, almost like a cardstock, but very bendable. So I glued it onto covers that I had made just with thick paper. So this is a book of little treasures. And I think I went back on YouTube actually, and I found out when I made this, which was May of 2015. So coming up on 10 years for this one. So this one is, the first thing that I learned how to cross stitch a spine. And I created a YouTube video. It's actually the first video I ever produced, was how to do this cross stitch spine. Since I made it 10 years ago, and it was the first video I ever did, you can imagine that the quality is not good. It's a very difficult thing to try and explain. And inside here, I have some samples of what it looks like. Here's a sample, and I show you how I made these samples. So you can imagine that this is the inside of where the signatures are sewn in, like in here, for example, right? This is the inside, this part, and then this is what the outside on the spine looks like. It's too hard to be holding the book and flipping it around with the needle and the thread and doing this and all that. It's just like impossible to show on film. So I didn't do that great of a job. I explained the concept and maybe that's enough. But sometimes I still get comments from people saying, this isn't a very good video. Like, I know it wasn't very good, but it was the best I could do, honestly. And even if I had to redo it now, 10 years later, I don't think I could do much better, honestly. So anyway, this is my little book of treasures, or a book of little treasures. And I also made a video of this, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing page by page, but I had a lot of fun creating this one. And the lesson that I learned with this one is that you can use your junk journals as places to store little treasures, and that's why it's called a book of little treasures. This is a vintage currency note from Germany in 1914, right? So I love that this fits so nicely in here, right? And then, so I went ahead and I started to add more and more vintage things in here. And I also sewed in an envelope. And how you do that is that you cut out the envelope pieces, and then once it is laying open, once it gets sewn in, then you fold the pieces in so that you don't see the stitching. So this is the middle of the signature right inside there. There's a lot of blank pages in here, so I can come back and add things as I would like to, right? I did put a little bit of hardware in there, and I also sewed just a tiny bit. Here's another envelope that's in the very middle of my signature. And I think I have another sample of, yeah, here it is. So these spine designs, this is with 3 rows, 1, 2, 3, so 3 signatures, and there are 7 points, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, yeah, 7 points where you can sew. And here's what it looks like inside. Okay, so I will put the link to this video of how to cross stitch. This is a different design than this one. You see there's the longer elongated part, and then the argyle design is here, versus here's the argyle design here, and the elongated part is in the top and on the bottom. Okay. Another envelope. Oh, this one is not in the middle. This one continues on the other side. Yeah, right over here. So this side and this side. And then I just kind of, even though it's a long, wider envelope, I made the cut here so that they would both open at the top this way. Okay. And then a few more paper treasures back here. Another banknote. I think this is a Russian one. And then a beautiful postcard. I love this one. Okay, and then a doily sewn in at the back. So next, this journal is one that I have very mixed feelings about. This is a book. I took a book of Browning and I cut out the insides, and then I created a junk journal from this book. This book is a book that I created and dedicated to my grandmother. I have mixed feelings about this book because it took me about 8 months of working on it all the time, like every day for 8 months. The problem is that I was so inexperienced with making junk journals, and I was second guessing myself every step of the way. I was just nervous about, am I doing the right thing? Does this look good? I wasn't sure about using the materials. And so the whole project was very stressful and not enjoyable. In the end, I'm happy with the way that the journal turned out, but it was unpleasant to create this one. So that's why I have mixed feelings about it. I will show it to you. After my grandmother died in 2013, I got a box of notions, sewing notions that belonged to her, and I had them, just this big tin. It was like this high and this wide, and there was a lot of stuff in it, and I didn't want to keep it all. And I thought, well, you know, if I can take out some of the things and put them in a junk journal, then I would be saving this kind of, you know, memory of her, and include photos where I could, so that the whole thing would be dedicated to her. So the spine is sewn on this hard back, and then I glued it into the book cover. So I wrote a little note about my grandmother, her name and where she was from, and a little bit of her family history. And then I went ahead and I did some collage with lots of the things that she had in that box. So this rickrack was in there, for example, very, very different. And there was a lot of embroidery things. So I kind of made some pockets with that, and cut out things from Needlecraft magazines. This is her at age 17. And I did this with some eyelets, and oh yeah, I did this on the card and then glued it onto the page. That's why you don't see the sewing on the other side. The buttons were challenging. Sometimes I cut off the, how do you call it? Is it the shank? The part that extrudes, that holds the thread that's attached to your clothing. So I cut that off so that the button part would lie flat. This one as well, I cut it off. And then I also added little bits of lace and embroidery and things like that. More buttons. Sometimes I sewed the buttons on a little card, or other times I just glued them onto the backing. This, I have no idea what it was. I found it in there. It's plastic, and then it has these holes, and then these bits are tied around it. Not sure what that is. Bias tape. And then these things I got out of a J. Peterman catalog. You know, they kind of sell vintage clothes, but it's very much in the 40s style, which I like. Oftentimes in my journals, I leave a blank page or a blank spread. I honestly don't know why I do this, but very often I find myself just leaving a page. I think that it's an invitation for me to come back at another time and to add something else to it. I think it's a symbol to myself that it's never done, and that you can come back and add more at another time. I'm guessing that's why I do that. Again, my grandmother, and then one of the pictures I took the last time that I saw her before she passed away. So that is this junk journal. After I finished with this, I was absolutely exhausted mentally, and I was like, I never want to do a project like this again. It was just too stressful, too stressful. So then I got to thinking about the opposite. what if I could make a journal that was completely not stressful, and what would that look like? What if I could make a journal where I just practiced and just played with paper? And that's where this one came out. This was a journal that I got, a blank journal from the Target bargain bins for $3. I tore out a bunch of sheets because I knew that it was going to get very, very puffy, very big, and it did, definitely. And what I did was I simply wanted to play with paper. Here's a little piece from the Teresa Collins pattern paper that I had left over. Here's another piece of pattern paper, and then just stuff that I pulled out of a magazine. Lots of things came out of magazines, a little bit of junk mail, anything, you know, any leftover scraps that I could put together, that I could assemble and use in some way on a page went in here. Even something like a receipt, Target receipt. And this is nice because I can see this was December 2015, right? There's also a lot of my kids' scraps that I have in here. Okay, 2015, I can see that again. So here's, you know, just playing with glue, glitter glue, right? Whatever. I just had fun with this, and that was the whole point. It was meant to be very light, very easy, nothing stressful. I think that having these kinds of fun glue books around, I think they can be so therapeutic and relaxing and challenging in the respect that when you have colors that you want to play with, these types of glue books are so much fun. With this playing card, I remember that I took sandpaper, and I scuffed it up just a tiny little bit, and then I used some kind of ink on my finger and rubbed it on there. So it could also be a place where you experiment with technique. See, here's another empty page, and over here as well. I could add more things in here if I really wanted to. So once I did this one, I had so much fun with it. I was like, bring it on, let's do more of that. So I created my next junk journal out of this cracker box, and I sewed in 4 signatures. And once again, I had a huge amount of fun with this because it was so such a collection of random papers and random things that it just worked for me. It just worked for me. It's a piece of coloring book that my must have been around 5-year-old was coloring at the time. Even things like food packaging is in here, right? This is just, I mean, Kleenex box, seriously. You cut it out and then experiment with paint on the other side. Or even if you're just cleaning off your paintbrushes or cleaning off your stencils or something, you know, you can put them in here. So sometimes I made little pockets, sometimes I didn't. It was just, you know, what was convenient or what I wanted to practice doing. This was a rub-on. And this, where's the other half of that? Here. This was a paint chip that I cut out the hearts, and then I did this little bit of decorating on this page. A little pocket down there, a fold out, and then more painting on food packaging. You really can experiment so much with food packaging. It's just an extra piece of scrap from pattern paper. A paper bag, a lunch bag. And that's about it for this one. So these types of really junk journals, these have become playing ground, I guess you can say. They are a place where experimentation is, I really encourage it in myself to do it. And so I have a special place in my heart for these types of junk journals. So since I was experimenting with junk, I started looking in my recycle bin when I get letters in the mail and junk mail. I don't know how it is where you are, but in my part of the world, we get a lot of junk mail. And the junk mail, honestly, it's made with quality paper. A lot of times when things come in, they're printed on heavy cardstock. And so this as the foundation of something, as some kind of journal, can be really great, especially for experimentation again. So here I just took a bunch of junk mail and I bound it. How did I bind it? This is a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can do a 3-hole or do a 5-hole pamphlet stitch. And just put together pieces of mail, junk mail, right? In different sizes and different textures, some smooth, some rough, whatever. And you can create these books. Now, what can you do with them? So I have a couple more examples. Here's another one. Same thing. This one I covered with collage. I just glued in anything and everything, right? There's no theme, nothing. I just did a bunch of random pieces, or, you know, assembled by colors perhaps. But really, I didn't do too much thinking with this. So you can have fun with them this way, right? Or, let me show you the next one. This is the third one I have, the third example. And here I did collage, and then on top of that, I added some paints and layering with stencils, and just kind of did a bunch of more experimenting again. This, I can feel there's a gesso on here, so it's kind of gritty so that it could take color better. When you use this kind of paper and it's shiny, and sometimes, you know, ink or paints, they don't stick very well. So I put a layer of gesso on some of these pieces so that I could add some layers of color afterwards. A little bit of doodling, mostly rubber stamping, lots of rubber stamping, I should say. Okay, this was a cloth napkin, or napkin, piece of napkin in there. Right, another envelope. So, experiment. A lot of people focus on the final product. What is a journal like this going to look like, and what kind of meaning is it going to have, and all that. Yes, it can be really good to create journals like that, but it's also really good to take junk or to take things that have little value to you so that it frees you up to be creative and to try things that you would not normally try. So I don't usually typically do stuff with inks and paints. I tried it. Did I really like these results? No, I don't. I didn't really like these results, and I still don't. But I'm so glad that I tried and that I'm open to trying new things. Will I try again in the future? Perhaps. You know, I still have I have several of these blank little, I don't know, junk mail books that I can use in the future. So I'm open to continually try new things. So that's what these three little junk mail journals have taught me about that. Now, here is something that I have not shared before. At least I don't think so. I created this. It's a storage journal. I don't even know what you would call this. It looks like this, and it sounds like a board game, doesn't it? This has a little magnet on here, so there's a closure there, and inside is where I have like some storage things. So in here there is like a pencil pen case, and over here is whatever else. Double-sided tape, I have some glue sticks. So these are jewelry boxes, or things that you would gift something like jewelry in. And these are glued onto this background board. And this is a postcard, and underneath the postcard is a magnet, and there is a magnet here. You can kind of see the outline, and so this sits on here, doesn't move. Okay, so let me show you what this is. So this opens like this, and inside I have some pockets. The whole thing actually goes out like an accordion, I guess you can say. And I used these pockets that came from like page protectors. And I guess the thing that I learned doing this is that the page protectors are kind of hard to see and kind of hard to use on the pages. It was a neat idea. I'm glad I did it, but it wasn't very practical. And then also the pages, the pockets, they don't have enough give, I guess you can say. So you can only put a few small pieces inside. So here is the front, and then there's pockets here on the side and over here. So that was this side, and then it also opens this side, and I put this band in here. This is almost, I think this is just an ordinary hair band. And then I used that with some eyelets top and bottom, and then I could put a kind of a journal in here if I wanted to. If I wanted to work on a journal, I could use this. Okay. Oh, any more? Yeah, no, that's it for this side. So then that goes on here, and that is that. So it was kind of a cool experiment. I'm glad I did this. I bought the grommet tool to put in these grommets. I just wanted to play with that. They're really nice and flush, so they don't stick out at all. And you could put this into a bookshelf very easily. This is kind of neat because it can expand if whatever is inside here grows. But as I said, with these pockets, they're so tight, there's just not the ability to add a whole lot of layers of papers and things inside. So anyway, this was a fun little experiment. Right, so now the next three journals I want to show you are what I'm calling the Browning journals. So I made this journal with my grandmother's book, as I said. So the insides of this Browning book I used for the covers on these three books. And then I also was practicing my different stitching for the spines on here. And, just experimenting with how to do covers and binding and so on and so forth. So here's the first one. I don't know if I put a date on this one. Probably not. I'll have to go look it up. Here's where I started experimenting with themes for my glue books. And, oh, actually, you know what? I did put the date. I put it in here. So, Carpe diem, seize the day. This little book is dedicated to women, past and present, near and far, who are active in the pursuit of their dreams or finding the simple joys in life. So this was June 2016. So I discovered right around this time that you could buy and download printables. And I had been following Ephemera's Vintage Garden on Facebook. There was a group, and I loved the way that Debbie Ann is the person who designs. She designs really great sets of printables for journals. So this was from one of her printable packs, and I used it throughout this whole book as a theme. And again, I was experimenting with magnets, so I can, you know, the really thin magnets that you can glue behind something like a postcard, and then you can go ahead and add little things like this. This is a watch face, and on the back I glued a washer so that it attaches to the magnet that's underneath. And that way you can, you know, do whatever you want with your photo, and then it just holds it very nicely on there. Now, I had mentioned that I used Flickr for downloading photos. I think I'm pretty sure that's where I got these as well. And then I got them printed at FedEx Kinko's on good paper. So I really wanted the quality to be good on these, and also thicker. They think this is 32-pound paper. And that way, you know, they feel like photos. Even though they're reproduction, the heft, the paper weight is good, right? So here's more of that printable from Ephemera's Vintage Garden. More vintage things. Here's a little pocket. Still to this day, I look for and include photos that work in this little journal. Here's another one. This is a reproduction, but it's a beautiful photo. And another piece of vintage currency. It goes really nice with this vintage lace. And then this is a cutout, you know, one of those Martha Stewart punches. It's another vintage photo. Looks like World War II women. It's an envelope. Okay, so that is this one. The cover I made with those pages, as I mentioned, from the Browning book, but I took this kind of heavy cardstock, and I also used Tyvek in between so that it doesn't tear off from the back, the spine back. It doesn't separate from that. And then I covered it with tissue paper. And when I was gluing the tissue paper on, I used a paintbrush, and I used matte medium. And the matte medium, I had taken some out. I almost like spooned it out, or, you know, poured some in a separate container. Maybe in a little yogurt cup, I poured some matte medium. And I put a few drops of brown distress ink, probably that walnut color. and I mixed it into the matte medium, the gel, and then when I was painting it on, it kind of gave this little bit of, you know, colored, aged color to it. And then after that, I did a little bit of shading, probably just with some more ink and my finger, and just rubbed it along the edges. This was a rubber stamping that went on top, and the rubber stamping didn't come out very clearly, and so I had to go in with a pen and fill it out. But that's another thing that I learned, is that you can, most of the time, in pretty much like 95% of the cases, you can fix something up. If it doesn't turn out the way that you like it, there's always something you can add to the top. There's something you can do to fix the page. Now these two books, I decided that I wanted to use hardware. I wanted to put things on the tops that, you know, closures basically. And how I put them on was an eyelet at the back, and they just have a jump ring. Let me show you. Both of these have a jump ring that is a little bit larger than the eyelet, so that the chain cannot be pulled through. Right? That's how that catches there. Same thing with this one. So it's a super easy way to make a closure on a journal with a simple eyelet. This one, I had a rubber stamp of this kind of front entrance, and I thought it would be cool to mount this little lock. And I guess this was a Tim Holtz, or this little knob on here is a Tim Holtz knob. So I made sure that I could thread it through this, you know, piece that looks like a lock plate, and that's how I did the cover. I found this little lock charm, and it didn't quite fit over the knob, so I had to slice it to cut it open. So now it does fit. So that's what I did for that. Good. I labeled this one January 2017. These were more paper kits from Ephemera's Vintage Garden. That one, and probably this one too. Let's see. Yes. This was also Ephemera's Vintage Garden. Very beautiful. And again, I had these printed out on really good paper. I took them to Kinko's copies or FedEx copies and had them printed on 32-pound heavyweight paper, so that it was, you know, just kind of a higher quality. I just wanted it to look good. So it was an extra investment, I guess you can say. So I did this again with the little washer and the magnet underneath. Some really cool photos. And I also started experimenting with taking pieces of tissue paper and laying them on top of each other with some glue in between to kind of make a page that was a little bit more sturdy. It's still, you know, obviously very flimsy, but it has a really nice texture that you can touch, and it's a little bit more sturdy to hold photos and things like that. So that was a really good lesson that I learned in doing that. Another lesson I learned was putting cheesecloth in between signatures. Sometimes you have a very big gusset between signatures, and so there is cheesecloth and rickrack, and it's, you know, kind of laying in there nice and tight, and it just adds a nice touch to your pages. think I have a lot of blank pages in here, but that's fine. And I'm not really sure if I have a theme specifically for this one. But this was a very fun little book. And this one is, I did a lot of red with this, obviously I can tell. Here's more of that browning paper. See, as you can see, it's super thin, really, really thin. I had to reinforce it with washi tape. This is just kind of floating. Look at all this space in these gussets here. I could actually add, oh, maybe that's why this is here. I have more of this, so I could actually glue this in here. That would look really good if I do it like that. See, maybe I will do that. Maybe I'll glue that in there, because otherwise, that's huge. But I needed all that space because when this closes, right, there is room there. Here's more lace on the top. And I used red for the embroidery floss for tying this in. And then I have also a little bit more red on here. So this I started with lace, and it got me working on this one, which is a glue book devoted entirely to vintage lace. So in my area, in the South Bay of San Francisco, there is a lace museum, and it used to be in the city of Sunnyvale. It's now moved. They are in Fremont, I believe. And that lace museum, they have sales where they would sell vintage scraps of lace. When I volunteered there, I learned what were the different types of laces and where they originated from. Since it has, the lines for note-taking or journaling, I wrote some notes about the lace and included it in here along with a lot of samples. Cut work lace. So sometimes I would glue the lace onto a card of some sort so that I could use it that way. Or I, just glued it into the page itself. Bobbin lace, Cluny lace, Duchesse lace. There we go. Maltese lace. So, and then, yeah, so this was really kind of fun to play with all these examples and put them in a book like this where it could almost be cataloged. Filet laces, machine lace, right? Here's some more buttons that I put in. And yeah, so for this one, it does not have the sewing on the outside. I did the sewing onto this hardback piece, and then I glued that into this cover. Okay. So just like these three, I did the same technique with these two books where I took the base, I glued the base page. This came from a catalog, so I took the United States Stamps and U.S. Possessions catalog and I glued it onto a piece of like a heavy cardstock, and then I did that whole process with the matte medium and the ink, mixed it up, and then glued on a piece of tissue paper over the top. So it kind of gives it this frosty look, and it also gives it this kind of bumpy texture to it. Here you can see that more clearly here. This one, it looks like it's splitting a little bit here. There is Tyvek in between, so it's not going to tear, but I have to think about how I can make sure that that doesn't disintegrate any farther. This one is sewn in with some stitching, right? And this one is devoted to postage stamps. So I have a lot of collages with postage stamps, envelopes, just storage for interesting things, and then also some like Americana pieces, since this is the United States stamps. Okay, so that's what this one is. A lot of blank pages again, so I can come back in here and continue to add things if I would like to. That's always fun. And then this one, oh, this was another printable set from Ephemera's Vintage Garden. This one I do remember is called Gentlemen Scholars, or Gentlemen and Scholars, something like that. So I loved that theme, and I used it throughout this book. So a nice big map in here. Map of New York from 1895. This is just an envelope. Now, here is a lesson I learned about double-sided tape. You can see this discoloration, and this discoloration comes from tape that is not acid-free. That's why it's so important. When you use glue sticks, when you use double-sided tape, it must be acid-free. If not, you get results like this. Now, maybe it's not a big deal, maybe you don't mind, and for the most part, I don't mind, because it does serve as an example, and one that I can visibly see, and it reminds me, don't buy stuff just because it's cheaper, right? Buy stuff that is going to be the best for what you need it for. Since I make so many of these books, and these books are important to me, I want them to look, you know, the best that they can. So investing a little bit more money into good double-sided tape is worth it to me. Okay. Just a lot of envelopes. I love using envelopes and postcards. Here is this envelope that I used in the middle of the signature. So inside is where the signature is tied, but you can't see it because it's covered up. And in here I have this little wallet made from an envelope as well. This came from the catalog for postage stamps, or postage stamp album, I guess you can say. And that's what I used for the cover. Except I colored it just a tiny little bit with these gelato crayons. So here's what they look like. These are Faber-Castell. And they are nice because if you do something on them, they can smear pretty nicely. I really liked it that I can control the intensity of the color. I can make it as light or, add more and make it darker if I want to. So on here, I could take the colors just a little bit and add it to where something is green or something is blue, and then just go ahead and layer the tiniest bit of color on there, and it makes a big difference. It really helps for the colors to stand out and to come through. This cover got pretty dark, and that was kind of unexpected, or I didn't plan for it that way. And even some of this, kind of this browning is just kind of, I didn't really like it. So being able to go in with the colors and pull some of these colors back out was very helpful. And then what I did was then I add extra dark colors along the edges and these edges here to kind of just frame it and make the image pop, really. So yeah, these printables from Ephemera's Vintage Garden, very, very nice gentleman scholars. And that is essentially that. Oh, I also did it again back here with a little bit of green and blue. That's really fun, and must be up here as well. Yeah. See, I can tell that I used this right here. So around 2016, 2017, I discovered an artist by the name of Mary Green. And Mary Green did vintage collages in small books, almost passport size. And she has a website, Green Pages, I believe it's called. And what I did was I downloaded a bunch of her completed collages and I printed them in a print book. This brand was Mixbook. So I did this for the purpose of studying her art. And I have done this more than a couple of times with different artists where I really like their style, enjoy their style, and I want to learn from them. So when I created this book, it was for me. I don't share it with anybody. It's not for copying and selling or anything of that sort. It's for me to study and learn. So that's why I create these kinds of books. And I recommend other people do the same thing. If you're trying to learn from somebody, from example is the best way. This is just one of the suggestions that I have for doing that. So once I was, really focusing and paying attention to composition and style and, choosing large focal points and small pieces, background pieces, this became really interesting for me. And then I started to think about my own altered book where I would put in my vintage collages. So I created this book using only papers that were older than 1925. And it was just pages that I glued together. I didn't do anything else besides that. Just glued, two pages together, or sometimes three even to make them, very sturdy. And then just used a bunch of, things that I could that would make interesting collages entirely using vintage papers. This book is also still a work in progress. I still have a lot of pages to go, which is totally fine. I removed a tremendous amount of pages, and still the book is quite full. I'm even reluctant to add too many more collages back here. it's just going to get really bulky, and I don't want that. So for now, I've kind of stopped right here. The spine is already starting to split. So there's only so much more I can do, but that's the way it's turning out. So while I was doing the really fancy vintage, I was also doing the very simple, everyday papers and materials that I would come across. I liked using catalogs. This was a catalog for blankets or sheets or something like that. AAA magazine, which is a travel magazine. Better Homes and Gardens, probably. There's a jewelry catalog. So it's just a bunch of odds and ends. And the whole concept here is simply playing with paper, playing with composition, playing with color schemes, playing with texture, right? All these things I put in combination in this very, very simple yet fun, very satisfying glue book. Some thin magazine paper, you know, some art scraps, you name it is in here. So this one is 4 signatures, and I originally took a Trader Joe's box crackers. I lined it with a second piece of heavier cardstock, and then I put them in with staples. I used a long arm staple to put these in. Let me see if I can find a center. Yeah, there's a staple right there if you can see it. So I put in a couple, I think 3 staples, 2 or 3, and then I covered it up with this piece of paper so that you don't see the ugly side poking through on the spine. So these types of junk journals are very satisfying and very fun to work on in your spare free moments. I worked on this while I was, you know, sitting in the car while my kid was in a soccer practice, for example. So it wasn't anything where I had to be looking for precise vintage papers that worked beautifully in a collage. This was just more of the practice of putting in bits and pieces and then finding things that would go with the other papers, right? Then I did an experiment where I used fabric, and I found some pieces of interesting papers to work with at a group, an art group in Palo Alto, which is close to where I am. There is a Palo Alto Art Center, and once a month they have meets where people get together and do art. And they also have like a scrap table or share table, something like that, and people bring their leftovers, the things that they're not going to use, and it's kind of like you can grab whatever you want. So I picked up a bunch of pieces of this watercolor paper. They look like this, and they're on a very thick, I guess watercolor paper, heavy. And I was thinking, what could I do? How could I put this into a journal, and what could I do on those papers? And then I had the idea that I could take strips of cloth and set them between 2 pieces. Let's see if I can find a really good example here. Let's go through the middle. Yeah, here we go. So here's a piece of paper, and here's a piece of paper. And then I have a strip of cloth that is kind of touching both of them. And then I just sewed them. I put this through my machine so that it's sewing the paper and the strip of cloth. And then that way I could put them in as signatures rather easily. They're very flexible, they bend, and they're easy to put in. This one has 3 signature with 3 points holding them together. And I also found this upholstery fabric at that exchange table. So what I did was I took the fabric and I also put in the paper on the back of the fabric and then ran that through my machine, front and back. And then I collaged a little bit, I wrote on it, and this is how it turned out. I don't think I put a date on this. I wish I would have. Must have been around 2018. But anyway, this was a lot of fun to do. It was different. I don't usually sew. I don't usually use fabric. I also had these upholstery samples. So those were kind of fun to use the color scheme of these samples and see if I could match papers with them and see how I could make it work, right? It's more, again, more of an exercise. Then I also had some pieces of Tyvek, and or maybe the pieces of Tyvek were also in that exchange pile. But anyway, I grabbed some and then I did some stenciling on top of those. This is Tyvek, and someone had used alcohol ink on it, and it makes these really beautiful splotchy, you know, images in the background. Very pretty. Look at that. Very interesting. And this is just Tyvek, and it's actually two pieces folded back to back on each other, and it turns into something very sturdy. Right. So here are two more blank pages. I could do something else on here if I wanted to, actually 3. In the middle of this book, I have some rather bulky things. This was a piece of driftwood that I found on the beach one day in Santa Cruz when I was visiting. So that went in there, and it fits, it works, you know, it closes nicely. And anything else interesting in here? These kind of odd-sized pieces were very interesting. I like those. This is colored with these gelatos again. So the nice thing about these is that they're water soluble. So if you put some on and then get a wet or damp paintbrush, you can spread it around very nicely, and then it almost looks like watercolor. And that is about it for this one. And then on the top, I just sewed on some little stars and interesting little things just for decoration. Now, this thing I came across at a garage sale close to my parents' house. I was visiting my parents in San Diego, and one of the neighbors had a garage sale that I stopped over at, and I was like, wow, what the heck is that thing? Inside it is a bunch of envelopes like this, and there were like last will and testament, insurance, life insurance, automobile. I guess it was just a record keeper, you know, for valuable papers. And what I did was I decided that I would take a digital download, and that's here, and actually, I think this is still Gentlemen and Scholars. I had leftover pieces from my digital download kit of Gentlemen and Scholars, and so I used it in this. And I also by that time had started collecting foreign currency. Let's see if I have a bunch in here. I think I do. Well, not a bunch, but some. I started collecting foreign currency, and I really love these pieces as collage material. When governments are, commission whoever to create their currency, they put a lot of time and effort into into the finished product. And so those pieces are honestly so appealing, so pretty oftentimes. It's color schemes, it's the font or the type scripts, it is, you know, combinations of numbers and letters and codes, and then you've got foreign languages or languages that are not in the Latin alphabet, right? So these types of things are so much fun to work with in collage. So I would buy them time to time when I would come across them in antique shops, secondhand stores, you know, things like that. And they're not cheap. Sometimes I would spend up to $3 to $5 per piece, right? And some people would say, oh my gosh, that is just way too expensive. I would never spend so much. But it all depends on, you know, your use and how you want to use it. If I, you know, use a piece of beautiful currency inside a work of art, or what I feel is a work of art, then it's completely worth it to me to pay an amount like that. Oftentimes I also separate them. I'll tear them in half and use portions here or there. So that is, I make it work and I enjoy using them. This is actually glued down, so, but anyway, let me put this back in and then I will show it to you from the beginning. So I collaged on those envelopes. Sometimes I put a lot of currency in here, goodness gracious. Here's a portion, so I used the other half somewhere else. So I can use this still in another collage, right? And then I created these little pockets. I put some bank notes, checks, things like that. I wanted this to be valuable papers, right? And then, as I mentioned, I also used some of the printables from that kit. And that combination of the colors worked really well with these kind of legal papers. I was looking for this beautiful house. These are glued on. Automobile insurance, and I have this awesome little photo of this gentleman standing next to his car very proudly. Now this is play money, and there is a company, Vintage Ornaments. I think it's vintageornaments.com. They sell these. I will put the link in the description if you're interested in them. I like them because they're very flat, but it's got foil, and so they're shiny, and they look like coins. They do look like coins, and they're fun to play with. Look, I've got some more here. There's another pocket. Look how pretty this is. Look how unusual. I think this is a Chinese currency. Reds and oranges and this kind of aqua, or really, yeah, it's like an aqua green, right? What a combination of colors. So that is this. It's a very strange kind of system here. This is what the whole thing looks like. I cleaned it up just a little bit. I didn't have to do too much to it. And I used it as this kind of a very odd glue book. When I bought it, or when I got it from the garage sale, I had no idea what I was going to do with it. And it was sitting in my closet for several years. And that's good because it took me a while to figure out, you know, how I could use this most effectively. So as I was playing with this one and thinking about envelopes and how I could collage with envelopes, I started to experiment more and more with these kinds of glue books. This is a glue book of mail that, or of envelopes and mail that I've received from people over the years. And I have several of these types of journals, so many in fact, that I am not going to bring them out. I don't share those other journals because there are people's addresses and my address on there, and I don't want that out there. The P.O. box is fine, I don't care about that, but for my personal home address, that's something I don't necessarily want out there. So these pages are made up of envelopes that have been split open. And they're, in addition to that, then I also put in papers or on those envelopes. Here you can see this is the back side of an envelope. On that split envelope, then I would add more envelopes on this way, right? So it's just layer on top of layer on top of layer with envelopes. Sometimes I left the flap open so that I could put things inside. Sometimes I left the notes or included the notes, right? And yep, that's that. So this is so satisfying when I finish one of these. They take a lot of work because there's a lot of consideration of how to create these signatures. Sometimes I have a large envelope and then I go ahead and then I decorate them myself with these stamp sets of 4, or any kinds of, you know, stamps that are all attached together on a piece. You can also use business envelopes. Those are fun as well. There's a pocket there. Here's a card, a couple of cards. I have to glue this in here, I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So there's a lot of space between these signatures, but I really needed that because once I completed these, I was stuffing so much onto these pages and into the envelopes and more envelopes inside envelopes. Then the pages get really, really tight. Right? So here's how that turned out. Look, it's still even getting larger than what I want it to do. I have so much more mail. I have this bag and it's just stuffed full of mail that I have from people, and I've already gone through it. I've answered letters. I've seen everything, but I need to take these pieces and to put them into some kind of journal. So I have a lot of work with these, plenty of work I should say, to get to work on these things. Okay, next up is this medium-sized journal that I made from an envelope. Now, what's interesting about using envelopes as covers is that they are quite versatile. So if you don't love the way an envelope looks primarily, you can always add things, like I did a little bit of rubber stamping. This is a piece of napkin that just went right over the top. These stamps were originally already there when it came through the mail, and then I also added this. which kind of folded over to the front, to the first inside page. When I made this, I emptied out the contents of the envelope, and what I did was I cut down cereal box, the size for the cover, the front and the back. So when I open the flap of the envelope, I can push down the cereal box into the envelope, and I'm pretty sure I glued it down just a little bit, or I put double-sided tape so that the cereal box piece doesn't move around. It's fixed to the envelope. It's not going to move. There's nothing, well actually, you know what? There is backing. I cut a little strip of the cereal box, and I also put it as the kind of to make it a little bit more firm for the spine. And then there is a last piece that goes for the front. And it's just enough. It's just enough to make it a little bit sturdier without too bulky. So that's a nice idea. This one has 2 signatures in it. And the theme of this one is just kind of a beige color theme. I had more envelopes that I wanted to experiment with. And then I just found images and things that would go along with the beige theme. And I like the way it turned out. It's very simple. I used a lot of scraps and things that I had still left over, receipt, and little images that I cut out of magazines, right? And then of course some book pages and a lot more of the envelopes. Okay. Very pretty images that I could just find that came my way, basically. So very simple journal, very enjoyable to make, right? Okay. Now with mail, I also made this one, and I received a package in the mail with this priority mail 2-day label. And the box was in such nice condition, not banged up or bent at all, and I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to make a journal from this? So I removed some of the sides and I opened it up like this, and I put a little bit of tissue paper because it was, I don't know why I decided to do that. But then on top of that, it was very easy to rubber stamp and then add some additional papers to it. And then once the cover was made, then I figured out how many signatures I wanted to add. I have 3 signatures in here, and I kept, some of the original papers and things that came on the envelope, and then I added some of this other stuff. In here, it's just all US mail, or actually international. A lot of postal things and some nice postage stamps that I have not even used yet. As I find some interesting pieces. I also used the cover of the catalog, the stamp catalog, for some of my pages as well. Anything and everything, basically. Rubber stamps, stickers, even mail that came through. Right, a lot of good stuff. And then I have some of the international ones back here. So that's what this is all about. So postage stamps is a really big love of mine. They are so interesting, and you can collect by topic, by country, by year, or by era. And I love to play with color in postage stamps. So that's what I wanted to do primarily with this one. I bought a ordinary journal, blank journal from a store, from a stationery store. And then I changed it, or I turned it into this book where I collage with postage stamps. And I tried not to do too much with paint and ink. This is a little bit with modeling paste and some paint, because I didn't want it to warp. I didn't want the pages to warp. So I really did try to keep it to a minimum. I didn't want to experiment so much with mixed media in here, but I ended up doing that somewhat. So even though I removed pages, again, it got really bulky, and I have a lot of blank pages at the end that I don't think I'll be able to do anything in, because I don't want to add any more to the size of this. So for these, I used a lot of the gelato markers again. I put down some gesso to give it tooth, as they say, where you can add something and then smear it really well with your fingers. Here's another one with the color and the gelato colors. When I had series of stamps, then I could use them. I would figure out how I wanted to do it in a spread. So then I would use rubber stamps and the gelato colors and just kind of play. I also just played simply with the postage stamps and color. So some of these stamps, the ones in the middle, they have two tones. So they have brown and then this kind of pink red. And so then I would put the top portion in brown and then the bottom portion in the other color, which is red. Same thing with this. This is purple and blue, so I would do the purple and the blue. This is again with gelato. This one is kind of dark, but I really like the space theme, and these Soviet stamps are awesome. This one too, I did a little bit of stenciling in the background and then played with the color of these stamps. This was an experiment with putting down the matte medium. I think it was a photo or maybe a copy of something, and then waiting for the medium to dry and then pulling off the paper, and then you get the image. So that's what that is. Again, with the two-tone stamps, green and blue and pink and this dark yellow. A lot of stenciling, playing with color. That's a fun one. I made these little like groupings of stamps, and then I punched out these shapes of a heart, and then these are more the gelato colors, and then just smeared with my fingers. This is so interesting. I love to look at this one. I used the same rubber stamp, but I varied it in how thick the ink would stamp. So I really inked heavily and then placed it on some of these portions. And then other times I would ink it and then press it 2 or 3 times, and then on the third or the fourth time I would get a very light impression. So it was just kind of experimenting with this heaviness and the lightness of the same rubber stamp. And then I had color, and playing with the color that came with this series of Belgium. Oh, actually it's Congo postage stamps. Whew, this is another busy one. This is all with stencils. All with stencils and probably acrylic paint. And then Czechoslovak postage stamps. More Czechoslovak postage stamps. So I love this journal, and I will continue to add more stamps and things to this. A little bit more, not too much, because I don't want it to grow too much more than this. So I want to show you some journals that I've made with rings, and you may have heard me talk about why I love to use rings as a way to bind papers together. So some of the great things about using a ring is that you can open and close the ring, of course, and change the order of your pages. And it's so easy if there's already a hole in the paper that you're using. These are index cards. And then you can just, keep on adding and working on it. So this is the shape. I'll show you where is one, a blank one. I got this from a friend of mine who gave me this weird kind of index card material that already had punches in it, punched holes, and said, hey, maybe you can do something with this. And I thought, well, maybe I can. So I started with these collages on the index cards, and it turned out to be a pretty awesome project. So I decided to make copies of these. I scanned them on very high quality machines, and then I had them printed into sets. So that's what these are, and I still sell them in my Etsy shop. And the reason why I did that is because sometimes you want to hold in your hand the finished product of what somebody else has created. It's really nice to be able to flip through something in the original size, the original content, to be able to see it and to touch it and to visualize exactly how a project was approached and how it was done and how it turned out. So that's why I wanted to share these in print form. So they came out really well. I used a really good scanner, as I said, a professional scanner, and then I had them printed at a professional printer in Sunnyvale, close to where I live. I have a couple more examples of ring journals, and I had rings on these, but I took off the rings so that I could take some photos of some of these pages, and then I misplaced my rings. So I need to get some replacement rings. But these covers, you can see, these are from Reader's Digest books. So it's so simple to get a punch that can go through these covers and go through your pages, and then just put it together with a ring, with two rings. The punch that is really useful for putting holes in this is this Memory Keepers, right? It goes through this cover pretty easily. So I'll just show you some of these. We don't need to go through all of them. I used a lot of file folders cut down, right? Because they're very, very sturdy. And then between, just added some vellum, fun papers. Here's another file folder. I guess I must have bought these in a set, I think. The tabs, some of the tabs go to the top and some go to the side. You might recognize some of these from my 50 prompt collection, because that's where I got these from, several of these. This one I love. The S&W coupons, and they match perfectly with this the Soviet stamp on here. Beautiful. Oh, there's a little bit of currency. 1-cent stamps or low denomination stamps are so fun to play with and so fun to use in your collage pages. So don't forget about those. Got some birds. This is just a photograph. I photographed something pretty. I don't know why I had printed out, but I liked it, so I kept it in here. Okay. This is a card I received, thank you card, for ordering some stamps. So rubber stamps, there is this company called 100 Proof Press. They make some really interesting, unique rubber stamps mounted on wood. So if you are interested in a company that does make stamps, you can check them out. So there's that ring journal. And then I also have this one, and it doesn't have a cover. It doesn't have a cover because it used to be in a note or in a book, you know, a 3-ring binder, I guess you would call it. But then I had so many pages in here, it outgrew the binder and it didn't fit anymore. So I had to take out the pages and get larger rings. And this is what it looks like at the moment. So I think I need to come up with some covers for this eventually. So these are just more collages. Oh, this journal, I started using a lot of wine labels. And the way that I do that is once I have an empty glass bottle, I fill it with boiling water, wait about 2 to 5 minutes, and then peel off the label. Because there's glue on the back of the label, and when the glass is heated up, it melts the glue, and then you're just able to pull the label right off. So that is what these are. These are all labels. This is, see, it was a gardener's notebook. So I have a whole bunch of these empty pages still, but, you know, so I could continue to add. I can move my pages around. It's such a versatile way to create. So again, I don't need to share every single one of these pages. Sometimes the pages are hard to turn on these because they get stuck right on the, what's it called? Right on the joint. So let me move this over a bit. That's one of the negatives, one of the downsides of using of rings. You know, everything's got a positive and a negative, so you just have to weigh and see what works best for you. Got the blues here and the butterflies. Okay, so that is what this one is about. Now I had started to experiment with using rings in eyelets. So you can get a smaller ring and put them in here, but it was pulling just a little bit too hard, and I wanted the papers inside to kind of be a little bit more flexible. So then I started experimenting with using ribbon as a way to bind paper. So these are hole punched. On the cover there are eyelets that are put in to make them a little bit more sturdy. And then sometimes I use these hole reinforcers on some of the papers, especially if they're very thin like this. So those reinforcers help a lot. And I just kind of have interesting papers in here again. This is, you know, just pieces of mail put on top of each other with a very beautiful postcard on the other side. So I like this tiny little, well, it's not tiny. I like this little size. So I have that one and I have this one as well. And this one, I did not even bind it. I just have the papers loose in here, sitting in here like this. And that works too. I mean, it's not a book to be read, it's just a book that is holding interesting vintage papers. So, and also some not vintage papers. This is just a piece of pattern paper, but I liked the way that it works in here. So let me see if there's, yeah, there's some interesting things in here. Beautiful. Look at that. There's another one. Very pretty postcard. And more stamps. I don't even know where this came from. I don't remember. Right. So it's just a collection of lovely pieces of paper, mail, stamps, right? Go. So you can also create books or journals of loose papers. You don't need to bind them necessarily. Of course, it all depends on how you will use it and how you will store it. But if you have other books or things that you're taking care of that need special attention like this, yeah, it's a little bit more fussy, I have to say, to deal with a book that doesn't have any pages that are bound in it. But you can make it work if you want to. Then I have this little red book. This cover was made from index cards, 2 index cards that were glued together. And the original index cards were a very vibrant blue, so I painted them red instead. The spine is, oh, I don't even know what it's called. It's that grunge paper. It's a Tim Holtz product. And I cut out the spine width from the same material, which is that index card. But then I used these brads in the cover. And since there's 2 index cards, I punched the hole just in one index card and attached the brads to the spine with the grunge card. And then when I glued these 2 cards together, then you don't see the brads on the other side. This is a real watch piece, and I bought a little container of pieces from watch and clocks and then tried to use them in some of my collages. And these little crystals are Swarovski crystals that I added into, just glued them into the little spots. So there is an eyelet back here, and again there is just this little jump ring that holds this chain, and this closure is a jewelry closure from a necklace. So there's a magnet there and it's just closes like that. So inside there are lots of pages and things that have the color red in them. And with this, there are 3 signatures, and all I did was look for things that had some kind of red or that could match with the 2 pages on a spread. These are from Vienna. This is Gustav Klimt painting and Straßenbahn tram system. So just loads of fun. And I keep a little box with things that I come across that are red that I can go to from time to time and keep on adding pages in this little book. It's a little pocket here. There's also a lot of black, red and black. But anyway, very fun. very fun. So you do not need to finish a project right away. It is so enjoyable to be able to go back and to go in and to add things over time. It feels like this project is a work in progress, and adding to it layers and pages is a fun thing to do. So the next thing I want to show you is this Rolodex holder. Now you might be thinking, but that's not really an art journal. But I would say, think about it this way. Does it have pages? Yes. Does it have a spine? Yes. So it could qualify as an art journal. That's the way I think about it anyway. This one is one that I started first with this Rolodex holder, this stand. And the great thing about Rolodex holders is that you can work on a small Rolodex over, a period of time. You can do one a day, you can do one a week, or just whenever you feel like it. And then as the time goes by, your collection grows and grows. So is this something that I did all at once? No, this is something that I built up, and I also exchanged with people and participated in swaps, group swaps. There are too many to go through all of them. And sometimes I might add something just that would be interesting, that is not collaged on, that just is flat and might fit in a Rolodex. Let's see if there's other examples of that. But I very much enjoy doing this kind of art. There's just some stenciling on the back of some of these if I didn't collage on both sides. But most of the time I did. There's another card. I like these little bits of interest sprinkled in between cards, art cards. This one is entirely just a little tiny envelope. Well, there are too many to go through. Oh, I think I reached the end because I have these extra little ones in here. So yeah, so there's that one. And then the other one is this one. This one is also still very much a work in progress. I really started putting effort into this one with the 100-day project. And actually the 100-day project is coming up starting in February again. I never complete the 100-day project. Well, I should say last year was the first time I ever tried the 100-day project. And the goal is not necessarily to reach 100 of something. I mean, if you would like the goal to be that and you want to work towards that, wonderful. But for me, the goal is to, during those 100 days, to just encourage me to keep on returning to this project and seeing what else I can do, paying attention to that project. So that's what I worked on last year, and as I mentioned, it's coming up again. So I will continue with the 100-day project, which will be great because I have enjoyed creating these cards in here as well. This one is orientation of left to right, where it's, well, actually, how do I say it? It is in portrait orientation, right? And then I do have kind of spreads this way. Whereas this one, the orientation is in a landscape, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So I have a lot of blank pages in here. So I need to go ahead and keep on working on it. I think next are some of these really small ones. Some small little glue books. These little glue books are so fun because they make great gifts, or I like to make them as gifts and mail them out to friends of mine. Let me start with these little ones. These ones are just stamps chosen in a particular color scheme. And then inside is collages. The size of these is ATCs, so also the same size as a playing card. And they are hole punched with tiny little punches, and then a jump ring is used to bind it. So these are really, really cute, really simple, really fun. There's only 4 pages. This is not done. I need to add a few more things on there, of course. And probably same with this one. Yeah, this is not even started yet. These are all blank pages. Because the ones that I have done, I've given them away to people. So these are the ones I happen to have laying around. And I wanted to show you these to give you some ideas of some really tiny journals that you could make. The next small ones I have are these little notebooks. They look like passports, or this one does. It's a passport size, but this one says Penmanship notebook. And what else do I want? Well, there's this one as well. Another little notebook that is passport sized or a little bit bigger. And then a couple that I have worked on in my membership, Vintage and Collage Club. I'll show you what those are all about. So first, I discovered these passports. These are from this company called the Unemployed Philosophers Guild, and they make these really interesting blank passports or notebooks, I guess you could call them. This one's the Penmanship notebook. And I loved the size and just the imagination that it really encourages when you have a little book like this. So with my Mars passport, I decided that I was going to set aside all my stamps that had a space-related theme. And with those, I would collage with postage stamps and with ephemera or images that are space related. And for the front, for the identification page, I found this stamp, this Hungarian stamp of a dog that looks very unusual to me. And it kind of looks like, I don't know, like some kind of space alien to me. That's where my imagination goes with this. So that's why I chose this funny little dog as my identification page. So in here, there's so many really cool postage stamps with a space theme. One's from the United States, one's from the Soviet Union. There's, during the 1960s especially, the whole space race and competition with the United States for the advancement in technology and advancement in space. So there's just a ton of these postage stamps. Here's some from Czechoslovakia. And then I just use washi tape, rubber stamping, anything out of magazines that had a space theme to it. These ones from the United States are beautiful. First Man on the Moon, Captain Picard, Star Trek. Canada created a set of postage stamps of Star Trek captains and Star Trek characters, and it's such a neat set to have. Such, you know, these colors, these reds or dark reds. I really like that kind of maroon color. That's where that came in. Here's another Soviet stamp. So I set aside these stamps. They go in my little, you know, I just throw them in here so that when I am ready to go for the next one, when I find papers or so, I can, you know, start thinking about what I can do for the next collage. Again, I tore out a bunch of pages, and I didn't tear out enough because this one is continuing to grow. And it's also the same situation for this one. This is a Penmanship notebook in the same size. And for this one, since I had blue on the cover, I thought that I would continue that theme and carry blue throughout. So that's how this one is coming along. Lots of layers, interesting layers. Some of these are getting quite thick, these pages. Some rubber stamping. Lots of black and blue and purple, it seems. Those are the colors that are primarily in this little journal. So this was the last page that I did. I have about 3 or 4 pages to go. So here also I kind of just throw things in, and then when I feel like it, I can pull it out. So the concept of using a passport as the substrate, as the basis for what you create your collage in, is quite an interesting concept. And even before I open it and say, hey, imagine you had one in your hand, imagine if, you know, what would you see inside if you opened it? And I created some collages with an Egyptian theme, or like visiting Cairo and Egypt. And here is, you know, what I came up with. Lots of things with pyramids and cities and design elements, things of that sort, right? So you could take a blank notebook and dedicate it to a particular place and turn it into, you know, something as if you did travel there, or if you really did travel there and had photos that you want to, almost like a scrapbook, you could do that. Or it could be totally hoping, wishing, dreaming, one day I will get to this location, right? So that's a fun idea as well. Now, in my membership in the Vintage and Collage Club, what we did in October and November was we had a bunch of papers from different countries, and we did collages based on those countries, as if we were on a journey and collecting papers along the way. So that is what this is. And we are going to do it again this year in October. We're going to be taking a new trip, going to new locations, getting new papers, new images, so that we can continue filling up our passports and collaging with papers of places that we would love to go and love to see. Next, I have this little tiny notebook. So this one, I also tore out pages. This was a Cavallini Papers and Company, and the pages were completely blank. They had no lines on them, like this. You can see back here, there's no lines. So that's what this looked like. When I tore out some of the pages, I went in with washi tape and I reinforced the spine a little bit so that the papers wouldn't fall out. The goal with this one was something very simple. It was to take 3 paper elements, 1, 2, 3. Here I just kind of flipped it, same thing. These are similar. This is torn in half. This is the same postcard, just torn in half. And then this is also torn in half and just, you know, one turned. So to put down 3 pieces and then add a little bit of embellishment with ink and rubber stamping. And let's see if I did 3s anywhere else. This is also 3, 1, 2, 3. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I guess there's more, not just 3. What about this one? Yeah, 1, 2, 3 with some rubber stamping in the back. My point is that I really learned the lesson that you can make an interesting collage with as little as 3 pieces. 3 pieces can be the minimum of what you need, and then you can add other things like rubber stamping and then other small embellishments. So usually I think of 3 papers. Those are the three things that need to be in there as minimum. And then what kinds of additional things can I add? Usually with my 3 papers, I don't glue them down right away. I place them down on an empty page. Then I can play with the positioning where I want them. And then once I have those 3 down, then I can think, would I like to put some rubber stamping underneath before I glue down any of those papers? Right? So here, this one is 1, 2, 3. I did the rubber stamping underneath, and then I had an embellishment on the top. This is the addition here. Okay, let's see, what about this one? 1, 2, 3, and then all the rubber stamping underneath and above are embellishments. 1, 2, 3, the rubber stamping is underneath this ticket. Okay, this one is cool because it's completely, the whole page is taken up. There is no white space left, right? So this is a picture that was torn in half, long ways, right? And then the pieces that I chose alongside, they're not matching. These ones are not matching, but what's interesting is that these 2 pieces so dominate the entire spread that it doesn't really matter that these ones are not matching. At least that's the way I see it. So that's what this is. Oh, and I accidentally did this one upside down. That does happen. That does happen from time to time. I will mistakenly do that. But is it ruined? Should I throw away this journal because I made a mistake and I created a page upside down? No, obviously I shouldn't. It just is just a reminder that I make mistakes too, right? And to keep it there and move on. And it didn't matter when I took the picture because, you know, you just turn it over and take the picture and then turn it over again and keep on going, right? So there is that. Here's my 3 pieces. I played with color here. So this kind of green color or blue, very light color. It's really fun with this postcard that is the same postcard, just separated into 2 smaller pieces. So 3. 3 is the magic number, the minimum that you can make a collage with, that you can play with and add things onto. Here is my growing set of Eclectic page glue books. These are something that I started with. Let's see, did I put a date on here? No, I did not. Marguerite. Seriously, you need to put dates on things. I might have one on an individual page. I think these were 2017. Gah, very frustrating. Anyway, I started this first one. You know what? I had my dog who is 8 was a puppy. So that was about 7 years ago, 7.5 years ago. He was a puppy and somehow he got chewing on this. I don't know if I, whatever, dropped it on the floor accidentally or what. But anyway, so this was the first one. And I have been working on them steadily ever since. And I have a small collection of them now. The awesome thing about them is that they are so easy to assemble. And I have this Zutter Bind It All that pushes them together, right? But you can also do the same thing with hole punches and rings. You know, gather the size paper that you want is similar sized, right? And then I always put together about 20 pieces of cardstock or pages or whatever, so that when I am turning the pages, I have a mix of different kinds of materials to work in. This is a postcard, right? An envelope. Here's just regular ledger paper, very thin. But even if it's thin, once you start to collage on it, it kind of gets, you know, the layers add up and it gets thicker. This is kind of odd-sized paper that's laying in here to, you know, add some interest with a tab. Here is a paint chip, a little tag. So you can add all kinds of fun things in these little eclectic page glue books, as I call them. This has got a little pocket, so it's just a fold over. And then once I finish one, this is a card. Once I finish one, then I do the same process and I start again, right? I think this is the next one. Here's a card in here, playing card that is, lots of postcards, another postcard, another greeting card, postcard, so on and so forth. Loads of fun, loads of fun. This is packaging from a tea box. Pretty photos. Okay. And then this is the last one I'm currently working on right now. So that's this. And when this is full, and I'm a little bit more than 3/4 full. 3/4 is where I'm at with this one. Then I just start looking for new papers and create another one to work in. Next are my tea-dyed journals. These are made with soaking in a tea bath. So this first one was one that I made in a workshop. It was with a very talented glue book artist, art journalist. Her name's Michelle Geller. She goes by the name of Hold Dear on Instagram. And she shared with us in this workshop how to create these journals with vintage papers that are soaked in water. And then once they come out, not soaked in water, soaked in tea. Once they come out, they dry outside, and there's so much interesting coloration that happens, right? And then assembling the pages after. So there's a lot of this, you know, kind of, you know, the pages are no longer flat, right? They're very warped, I guess you can say. Some are more so than others, but it's all interesting how it comes together. The pages are reinforced with page and reinforcers, or sometimes with tape. I think this is electrical tape. Just kind of creative ways. Here's ribbon. That's a very good way to reinforce a page. Oh yeah, and very hard paper. Cloth material. Here's my blank page. Something else that I can add eventually if I really would like to. Tickets. So I did this in her workshop several years ago, many years ago, and I did it once, just once, and I really wanted to reproduce, or not reproduce, but to create another journal. So in the Vintage and Collage Club over the summer, last summer, we did one together where we talked about the types of teas that we were going to use, the elements that we were going to stick in between the pages when we soaked them, some rusty bits so there it comes out on the paper. And we created our journals. And this was a very interesting experience. Very rewarding to see. There's a lot of trust involved. You hope that everything's going to go well when you start creating some really pretty collages and you're like, oh, I have to soak it in water, and then what's going to happen? What's going to happen when I pull them out? Is the glue going to get unstuck? Are things going to fall apart? Is it not going to look as good as when I'm creating the collage right now? So it's really is a leap of faith, but it's very rewarding after your pages come out, and sometimes they don't turn out perfectly and you're like, oh, how can I fix this? What else can I do? So there's a little bit of troubleshooting involved, but in the end, I was very, very pleased with how these pages turned out. Also, again, very crunchy, loads of texture. Here I put a key in between my pages. So yeah, more reinforcing. Here I've used some tape and, or how do you call it? Fabric tape, liquid tape, fabric tape. Sometimes I did the papers first and then I added the photos afterwards if I did not want to put the photos through the water. So you can also do that as well. Have some of the pages go through and then add some of the elements afterwards. So we are going to do this again this summer, probably starting in June in the Vintage and Collage Club. We're going to be working on a new little journal, or alternately new pages that can be put in the journal that you did last year. So that is the plan for the month of June. So you can see here some of the teas, the loose teas that were put in. What I did was I sprinkled loose tea, and then when I loaded the page or layered the pages, then I would put more tea in between like this. Then I bound everything together and then put it in the tea bath. And that's how these bits came out. I think in the tea there was some kind of blueberry or some flower that had purple or blue in it. And then with the cover, again, these are Reader's Digest. These are Reader's Digest covers, just very simply hole punched. And then I used a little bit of fabric glue with the fabric to bind it together like this. This one is a kind of a one-off art journal in the respect that I've only done one of these. It's an accordion style format, this side as well. I got this from a store, a discount store called Daiso. Daiso I don't know if they're on the East Coast, but there are some here in California and other parts of the West Coast. It is a Japanese discount store. It's kind of almost like a 99-cent store, but things are no longer $1. It's $1.50 or $2 is probably the cheapest that you can find things. But they have an office supply section, and in their office supply section they sell these. So when I did make a video of this, but a lot of people asked, where did you find that accordion? And I was like, ugh, it came from Daiso, and it's kind of hard to get a hold of. So anyway, but you could make one of these. You could use file folders, for example, and then just create hinges. Use Tyvek or some kind of you know, sturdy material that will hold these pages together, and then just do it in accordion, right? So the theme for this one was French furniture, and I used a lot of correspondence and postcards, letters, envelopes. French furniture and envelopes, I guess that's the theme. I also did some florals and made sure that I had plenty of postage stamps that were pretty as well. So I left a lot of space in the background. I was not so concerned with filling up my pages entirely, right? This was a very simple book because I didn't have to use too many elements. I kept these elements really large, almost intentionally, so that I could use up the space on the pages. But then I focused on making sure that I had one of these pieces of furniture. And sometimes I added a little bit of rubber stamping, but not too much, just here and there. Okay, so that is this one. And I did put a date on it, 2023. Here are my two Christmas journals. I just did this one a few weeks ago, in December. So I made this with dividers, tab dividers, and regular masking tape, right? Very simple concept of constructing this book. Is it gonna hold? I'm not sure. But if it breaks, then I can just use more masking tape and, you know, re-tape the section that is broken. I also put a bit of glue and fabric over the outside of the spine, so that is additionally holding it together. And I put a lot of glue. I really did. I was generous with the glue. So I was also keeping in mind that masking tape sometimes does rip. Masking tape is supposed to be kind of temporary, so I did intentionally put a lot of glue back there. So very simple, just Christmas holiday theme, and it does not need to be done all in one go. I've stopped here on the letter G, so I can continue next year and then the year after that until it is done. This one I did do all in one go because I was focusing on sharing how to do tab binding. The interesting thing about this tab binding is that it's how you can connect completely separate pieces of papers and bind it together. So these were file folder dividers, or folder dividers, right? And I wanted to somehow connect them. And I used this system, tab binding system, that I learned from other people online. So I did not develop this, but I used fabrics in a Christmas theme, and then just used also good glue, Aleene's liquid glue. I used this original tacky glue. This is really good for fabric. And then also this art glitter glue is very, very good. So either of these are excellent choices. So these are really great when you get Christmas cards from people or beautiful wrapping paper that you want to save in some kind of way. Cards, envelopes. It's just fun to save them and then put them on pretty papers and collage with them. All right. So that is that. Okay, we're getting down to the very last four. So this one is a teeny tiny little glue book that I made with construction paper, and the box was where I got a set of watercolors in a tin watercolors. I saved the box because it was so pretty, and then with that I decided to put in some ATCs that I had made from a masterboard. So I did a little bit of collaging, a little bit of rubber stamping. I have this beautiful Italian paper that I also wanted to highlight. No need to add anything onto this page, and the same thing here with the inside cover. Just, I love those beautiful Italian papers. This is just a little tiny receipt of a payment. So I put that in there with a trade card, a tiny little pocket with some kind of coupon certificate. Just fun little paper treasures. There's another check. This is that ATC as well as this one. I made a huge masterboard and then cut everything down and put them in here. Does this open? Yes, it does, like this. Okay. Pretty photo. A cluster, collage cluster. Yeah. Another blank page means that I still need to put something in here. Okay, there's that one. These two you might have seen when I did the tutorial on how to take a very large bag, well, I guess a paper bag, ordinary paper bag from the grocery store, cut off the sides and use either the front face or the back and create a very large piece of paper that is cut down strategically to fold and create these little glue books. So these are so fun to use as a way to practice your collage. You could make little photo albums, collage albums, or even do something with mixed media, because this paper bag, craft paper, is just really great as a foundation, as a substrate for all kinds of different mediums. Very simple, very simple. All right, so this is the last little book that I have to share with you. This is one that I did last year, and I had a group of cluster collages that I made with some French stamps, and I was trying to think, what can I do with these clusters? So I had this very large piece of ledger paper with beautiful handwriting on it, and I cut the ledger paper down into these squares. Let's see. So the squares are about 3.5 inches in diameter. So I placed the clusters on the ledger paper, and then I created this book with this construction paper in these soft colors, blues and purples and kind of a rose color, right? So that's what this book is, and the hinges was a piece of Tyvek that I just folded in accordion and then folded the paper onto the hinge and glued it on with double-sided tape. So you can see the cluster is sitting on this piece of ledger paper. And I tried to include stamps that kind of matched. They are French stamps, but then the color scheme kind of went along if I could make them so. This has got greens, this is kind of a reds or kind of violet color. And I also included these pieces of business envelope. So this is a very simple book. And then I made sure that I used washi tape as also a reinforcement. And then more washi tape on over the spine. And it just turned into this very nice little tiny book. I mean, it's literally 4 pages or 8 sides of material. So that is the end of show and tell. If you have any questions, please put them in the description. What I would like to do is collect the questions and then do a kind of a Q&A. And if there's anything else that I can explain, anything that you would like more details about, I can use that Q&A as a way, as a time to go ahead and answer those questions. If I made videos on any of these things, I will list them in the description so that you can see. Several of them don't have specific videos that go along, but some of them I did do a flip through. For example, this one. I know that I did a flip through of this with explanation about how I put it together and so on. So I will list that for you. I hope this was helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you the next time.